A very quick overview on iSpirit. As you know, iSpirit is a non-profit technology think and do tank. We focus on hard Indian problems, and we believe they will be solved by an innovation architecture which has a jugalbandi between private innovation and digital public infrastructure. And so both of these are needed to solve India's hard problems. This takes this kind of ecosystem building, which we call as playground building, takes time. We take a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year view to make it happen. And we believe that this is the case in every country. You have institutions that take a long view of these things. They are either think tanks, or their universities, driverless car, CMU, for example, or their research labs. So this is the case. We are one of the think tanks that is taking that kind of a view here in India. We work with 10-year planners, which are either policymakers or VCs, and we work with the doers. These are the most important people for us. And they are either incumbents or challengers. So they are either somewhat fearful about change, or they are really enthusiastic about the change. And all of us in iSpirit are no greed, no glory volunteers. When we solve this problem, when value gets created on the back of solving this problem, iSpirit does not tap into any of that value. It does not tap in. Individuals of iSpirit don't benefit from this, and iSpirit at large also doesn't benefit from this. So this is really what iSpirit is. A quick overview of the national health stack. This has 3 layers: the plumbing layer, the augmentation layer, and the ocean layer. And all the 3 layers are very, very important. And very often they have to come together to deliver value to the topmost layer, which is where the user experience, the app experience, or the consumer experience, the patient experience is going to be created, crafted, and delivered. So, so these are the layers. And one way these layers come together is they make, for example, this is just one of the examples. It makes teleconsultation come to life. It kind of separates the front end part of teleconsultation from the back end part of teleconsultation. So a back end, a set of providers, they can all share a single app, and which is happening in the case of Swasth. They have a Swasth app, which is a single app that has many backends. And there are other elements of this also that are there. So what are the other elements? These are to do with standards of care. For that, you have something called the protocol server in the second layer of the health stack. You have doctor registry and THR in the plumbing layer of the health stack. It also requires transparent business rules. Without that, trust cannot be built. And the ocean layer has a very important role to play with that, along with auditable money settlements, which, by the way, again, belong to the plumbing layer. So the way to see this is that if you really want standard of care, then 1, 2, and 3 are very important. So this is the registries, the PHR, and the protocol server are essential to providing high standards of care, for, let's say, teleconsultation, or it could be for inpatient later, care fiduciaries, diagnostics, all those, they go through a similar kind of a template. But if you're looking for transparent kind of a business rules, then 4 and 5 have a role to play. Ocean has a role to play, and the claim settlement, e-vouchers, all of these are auditable settlement mechanisms. They have a role to play. So I've rushed through this a little bit, largely because we've covered this in the earlier 3 open house sessions at the beginning. So, didn't want to spend the same time this time around. So there is a roadmap for the 3 things that we have already talked about: personal health records, doctor registry, and ocean. So everything is still as per, this is unchanged slide from last time, and everything is still as per the dates that we had indicated when we started these open houses. So no change. Watch out for 30th June, and we will not be doing open house next Saturday. We'll be taking a break, and we'll be coming back to an open house on the 27th of June, where we will talk about the test environment that will become available to you starting 30th of June. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Vikram. Vikram, if you don't mind doing a quick reintroduction of yourself. I know you had done it last time, but many people may be joining for the first time. So if you can do that, and over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Sharad. Hi, folks. I'm Vikram Srinivasan. I've been a volunteer with iSpirit for about a year now. So I'm an engineer. I've been in the technology field for about 20 years across various domains. I'm also an entrepreneur, so that's basically what I am. Very excited to be volunteering with iSpirit. With that, let me start sharing my screen and go over the registries. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the health stack registries. For those of you who were on the call last week, we released the public APIs for the registries. Basically, how if the information about the doctor is already on the registry, how do you access it? This week, we are releasing the enrollment APIs and what are called the attestation APIs for the registries. So we'll quickly walk through what happens during enrollment and what happens for attestation. Following that, we'll take a couple of questions that came up in last week's discussion on registries. So first, the enrollment APIs. So the steps are as follows. So remember, what we wanted was a trusted registry where at the end of the day, as Sharad was talking about, we want to build trust in the ecosystem. And to build trust in the ecosystem, we need to make sure that the doctors are who they are. And we want to build, if you recall the public APIs we released last week, we had something called a e-know your doctor, essentially similar to a eKYC form, right? So we want to make verification of the doctor as seamless as an eKYC is today. Today, for example, when hospitals onboard doctors or telemedicine platforms onboard doctors, there is a huge cost involved in verifying that the doctors are who they are. So these are some of the things we want to simplify via the registry process by enabling a eKYD or e-know your doctor capability. So during the enrollment process, we have a bunch of enrollment APIs. So what happens is, and these APIs can be done in either a self-serve manner, so the doctor themselves can go and register themselves onto a portal, or it can be an assisted manner. So a hospital where the doctor is, or a telemedicine platform such as a Practo, for example, can help the doctor get enrolled onto the registry. Okay? So there is some basic information about the doctor that is captured during registration process. The information that is captured is, of course, the demographic information such as name, gender, date of birth, phone and email. Apart from that, we are also capturing Aadhaar information because we want to do a e-know your doctor or eKYD kind of verification. Second, we capture the medical registration information. Basically, what are all the medical council registrations that a doctor has, where they're qualified to practice. And finally, we capture medical qualification information, essentially where they've obtained their degrees from, what colleges they've obtained their degrees from, what degrees they've obtained, what specializations they have, etc. So as a first step to the enrollment, we first do what's called a demographic verification or an Aadhaar verification. So this is based on OTP-based verification primarily. And once the doctor's identity is verified, the rest of the information that the doctor has submitted is updated or entered into the registry. But of course, we need to attest, somebody has to attest or somebody has to verify that this information that the doctor has submitted is indeed valid. So that is the next step that we're going to be talking about. So the enrollment APIs per se are specified in the link that you see below. It's a Swagger API specification. you can go on to the link and find the API specifications for enrollment. The next set of APIs are the attestation APIs. So attestation is basically the fact that once a doctor submits information about their credentials, it could be their qualifications or registration, somebody has to verify that these degree qualifications or their registration numbers, etc., are indeed correct, right? So so we will have APIs that talk to a bunch of empaneled entities. These empaneled entities could be the state medical councils or the MCI or NMC. It could be colleges and hospitals. Of course, there are edge cases. For example, people could have obtained degrees from foreign universities, in which case a pure API-based integration might not be possible. But at least for Indian colleges and hospitals, an API-based verification will be possible. And finally, telemedicine providers and hospitals who employ these doctors. So these will be the set of empaneled entities that will be allowed to attest the credentials of a doctor into the registry. Of course, we will be capturing who is the entity that is actually attesting to this doctor. So there could be different degrees of trust based on who has attested the information. For example, if the medical council attests to the registration number, that's a very strong degree of trust that you have. If the actual college verifies that the doctor has indeed got this particular degree, you have a very strong degree of trust in it, so on and so forth, right? So upon enrollment, what happens is that these attestation requests are sent to the appropriate empaneled entities. Example, to the appropriate college for the degree attestation, to the appropriate medical council for the registration number attestation. And empaneled entities once they have attested the information, they send back via the APIs, they send back an attestation into the registry. And this comes along with digital signatures so that you don't have unauthorized or unempaneled entities writing into the registry. And this is recorded in the registry API, within the registry for the doctor. And all of this happens in an asynchronous manner. So each of these attestations happens completely asynchronously. So we have all these APIs also specified in this link below. You folks can go and have a look and come back to us if you have any questions. We'll move on to certain questions that we got last time. We're picking 2 questions. The first question is that about unique IDs for these doctors. I think the concern is that the medical council IDs of all the different state medical councils, etc., are all in different formats. How are we going to handle that, right? So the way we are handling that is in the registry, we have a certain unique ID for each doctor, and for each doctor's record, and all the medical council registration IDs or numbers or whatever format they are in are stored within as what are called JSON objects with appropriate attestations. Okay, so that is the answer to the first question. The second question is, can an API call get all doctors in the country via this registry, or is there a consent layer with the doctor? If not, will the phone number or email of doctor be public? Okay. So the answer is, so first of all, for the doctor's information, we separate it out into 2 kinds of information: public information and private information. So in private information is information such as phone number, email, etc., which can only be obtained through consent of the doctor. But on top of that, we do provide search APIs, and these search APIs allow you to retrieve basic public information about the doctor. So for example, you can query by a doctor's name and see what their registration numbers are, what their qualifications, etc. are. So this is information, for example, that you can see on the MCI directory today also, right? right? So this is public information about a doctor, and there is nothing, this is not private information at all. And any private information will require consent from the doctor, and we have an authorization API to provide this consent. That's about all I have, Sharad, so I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thank you. We'll please, add any questions to the link that has been shared in the chat session. And we'll try and answer more questions as they come in. So with that, let me hand this over to Sid. Sid, you have a few questions that came in on PHR that you will be resolving, aren't you?
Yes, Sharad. I'll just share my screen 1 second. Yeah. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So the first question that came in is, I'm a potential, either I'm a hospital and hence a potential health information provider and health information user, or I'm a possible software middleware company and hence a potential bridge, or I have a lot of consumers already using my application, and so I could possibly be a consent manager. And so who else could I partner with, right? So if I'm a consent manager, I need HIPs, HIUs that are enabled with API bridges. Or if I'm an HIU, I need a consent manager to work. And one entity may decide to do everything, but by and large, a lot of folks will play specialized roles. And so the question is, who are the various players that are actively building within this system, and what are the possible areas where they're building in? So here's a list, and first off, I apologize if I've missed out anyone. These were just some of the names based on folks that had reached out to me. I'm sure there'll be quite a few that are building based on the specs that are published and haven't yet reached out. So one is on the consent gateway side, right? You've got the National Cancer Grid through ThoughtWorks building out this, and this is essentially the open source Project ECA implementation, wherein the link was shared in the various open house discussions. Then you also have the Swasth Alliance building out this consent gateway, which is orchestrating the routing, discoverability of endpoints, and the flow of consent requests. Then in the API bridge side, there are players like Live Health and Attune that have actively started work. On the consent manager side, besides for, of course, the Swasth app being a consent manager, the NCG consent manager that's already out there, there are players like Practo that would be playing that role. On the HIU side, you've got players like iClinic and Bajaj Finserv. iClinic already runs a teleconsultation system, and therefore they would like to be an HIU and raise consent requests and receive the individual's PHR so that the doctor on their platform could serve that individual better. And for folks like Bajaj Finserv, essentially using this to drive their electronic claims process in an OPD context. We even have folks looking at the long-term storage. As you know, the API bridges, when they partner with any HIP, are relatively short-term storage options, right? And so for long-term storage, where the user says, I want to push it to some locker of my choice, there are companies like DocBrief that's very actively designing and building on in this space. And then there are a bunch of other folks like MFine, Carefit, 1MG that are also actively building. So you can reach out to them. If, for example, you're an HIP, HIU and want to partner with an API bridge rather than build from scratch, you can reach out to the folks out here. If you are an API bridge or a consent manager and want to partner with HIUs, reach out to the folks out here. And yeah, if any of you are actively building and not listed, please do drop me an email as well. The second question is in terms of the consent managers have been authorized to collect consent, manage it, and then with user intervention, of course, in recurring use cases, withdraw it on behalf of data custodians, right? And this is in alignment with the design pattern that you see play out in UPI, where the permission is unbundled from your monetary custodian into third-party innovators like Bheem and PhonePe and WhatsApp and others, right? And so the question is, how does one ensure trust and transparency within the consent manager ecosystem, right? And so the way we see that playing out is, one, consent managers will have to be registered, right? And therefore that registry is maintained by the gateway, right? So you have the consent manager along with the bridges, of course, being registered. And in order to be registered, there will be a certification scheme in place that consent managers have to comply with. And the certification will cover both functional elements, right? So functional flows, functional APIs, and so on, and non-functional elements as well, related to security, privacy, high availability, all your NFR requirements, right? So fundamentally, consent managers, one, have to be registered. In order to get registered, they will have to be certified. And since the data is not flowing through the consent manager, right? The data flows directly from the HIP to the HIU. This scheme is extremely privacy protected. So that's the paradigm within which trust would be established for consent managers. The next question is essentially around the length of data storage within a health information user once they've obtained the user's consent. And this really, the answer to this is, it varies depending on the purpose with which the consent was asked for, right? So out here you see purpose. So you'll have a range of purpose codes and the description, right? And you will see another parameter called data life. So data life says that when an HIU raises this consent request for a purpose like, say, a second opinion, then the data life is specified by the HIU for how long they want to store that data, right? It could be a few hours, a few seconds, months, or possibly even years, right? And this varies by purpose to purpose. So if you take a look at it in the case of a hospitalization, right? The HIU, which is the hospital, would want to store data for at least 7 years, right? Because if there are subsequent audits that take place, they need to reproduce that patient information. The second is, you may have instances where it's a simple health tech app, right? And in that case, it's very transactional. And so they only store the user's PHR for the purpose of that, for the time period of that teleconsult, and then it gets wiped away once the inference is done. So you can enforce data life in a variable manner, and we expect it to be tied to purposes. That's how the flow would work. The next question is, in the case of file transfers, is there any expiry that is specified, and are the bridges going to be certified, right? So yes, there are two levels of expiry, of course. One is when the data is made available within a short period for a particular consent request, when the HIP, because these are async flows, when the HIP makes the data available for a particular window of time, which is probably, I think about, it's still variable, but maybe sub 10 minutes, right? The HIU has to go to the HIP and request for that data, right? And 10 minutes is in case there is any failures and network failures and so on, right? That's one. The second is, of course, like I mentioned earlier, expiry of the data within the HIU's environment once they've received it. And that happens through the data life parameter. And then the third is, what the question asked was, are they going to be certified? And yes, so every bridge, much like the consent manager, every bridge needs to be registered and therefore gets certified as a part of that journey. Apologies for the incorrect numbering. This should be question 5, I think. So the next one is there a broadcast request sent to all HIPs when a user approves a consent request from an HIU, bridge, or gateway? Or does the gateway maintain at least a list of available records? Do they cache it and maintain that? Because as a user, I may not know all the HIPs in the past. So the way to look at this is, one, from a user's perspective for their historic data, through the consent managers and the standardized discovery protocol that has been defined, they can fetch their health information, even though it might be linked to different digitally authenticatable identifiers. Whether they went to a health interaction, it got linked with the PMJ ID, or in another health interaction, it got linked with their mobile number and demographics. And in another, it was linked against their Aadhaar, right? So for historic information, a user can register with a CM, right? And link, use these different IDs and link. Hey, sorry about that. So the user can use these different IDs and link their accounts. This mapper is maintained internally by the consent manager itself, right? And it's not maintained by the gateway. So every consent manager maintains the linked list of accounts, and a subset of that would also be maintained by the HIP's partner data bridge for accounts that have been linked within that HIP domain. Going forward, from a user's perspective, he will use his consent manager ID every time new data gets generated. So the next time I go to a lab in the future, right, the lab, instead of asking for my email address, will say, hey, Siddharth, or hey, Saurabh, could you give me your consent manager ID? And I give it to them. And when the data is ready post my test, they push it against that ID, right? So in real time, I'll then get a ping on my consent manager app saying, hey, your test reports are ready and now accessible. And I may even link my consent manager to a health locker so that it automatically gets pushed to the health locker for long-term storage. Is there a way to capture data directly when it's generated by the user? I only see the user being considered in their capacity as a consent manager. And there are a lot of health tech apps like digital therapeutic solutions that are being built that allow users to generate health data. So the question is, how does this data get captured and how does it get shared? So if you look at it, the architecture just lists logically separate entities, right? And that's just so that you can understand it easier. People can understand where to build in this ecosystem a lot easier. But it doesn't mean one entity does not play multiple roles, right? So the user, of course, out here showing interacting with the consent manager because that's where the explicit authorization happens. But it's a user that first went to an HIU, like a doctor, provided some documents, shared their data, right? A health transaction happened, so that HIU also becomes an HIP subsequently, right? And that HIP then makes the data accessible and shareable for subsequent consent requests on behalf of that user. So one, it's not true that the user only interacts with the consent manager. These are just shown because they're logically separate. Second, on the point of digital therapeutic apps, yes, they're very much a part of that architecture. If you unbundle a digital therapeutic app, it is also an HIU and an HIP, right? So it's an HIU, it receives access to your data and enables whatever digital therapeutic, whether it's mental health and so on, right? Diabetes management and so on. And then they are also publishers. So they're also HIPs for whatever new data was generated as a result of that interaction. So you can fit in digital therapeutics as a health tech app, both as an HIU and as an HIP as well. So this question is essentially around, given that we're taking a federated approach, right, and federated storage, what happens if data bridges are down? Will that result in only partial data being shared with a doctor, or will it result in higher latency, right? And really, how does the architecture solve for this? So yes, in a federated model, it does place higher requirements on all the entities that are in the ecosystem to be available, right? And that is the reality of it. On the flip side, if you had a centralized model, while that's not good from a privacy point of view, it does make operationalization a lot easier. So in this federated architecture, there are a couple of points around this. One, like I said earlier, every API bridge has to be certified against both functional and non-functional requirements before being added to the registry that's run by the gateway to participate in this ecosystem, right? And so those non-functional requirements will take care of things like availability, right? Where it could be say 5 nines, 6 nines, and so on, right? The second part is, however, if you zoom out a bit, so one is the API bridge, but if you zoom out a bit, the question is of availability of the HIP itself, right? I mean, a clinic may stop tomorrow, right? And so therefore the clinic is going to end its partnership with an API bridge. So what happens to that data, right? So that's where the Health Locker piece comes in, and the Health Locker could be a hosted offering or offered in a trusted client of the user's device, like a pod, right? And users can consent to share their data for any new transaction straight with the Health Locker. So that way, when HIP is, because over a long-term period, right, on average, we live 70 to 80 years, over a long-term period, HIPs will go down, right? And so you don't want your data, like your old vaccination records, to be lost as a result of that. And that's where the Health Locker piece with appropriate portability becomes key, right? And so the next time around, when you share data from your HIU, that data can be shared directly from your HIPs via the API bridge or from the Health Locker, depending on where it's stored. And that's how long-term data storage and resiliency gets built into this architecture, so that the consuming doctor, the data consuming doctor, gets access to the most relevant records for that transaction at all points in time. So that's it in terms of the questions that came in. If you are interested in being a part, or you've already started building but want part of that list, please do drop me an email, and I'm happy to get you added, right? And more than happy to answer any other questions that you have on the architecture. And all our work, just to clarify again, is completely pro bono in the ecosystem, right? And our dream is essentially to see you guys being successful, seeing successful implementation, so that individuals can actually bring together all their health records and then share it in a safe, secure, privacy preserving manner. And again, there are different working groups that are at play. And really the best way to participate, we wouldn't encourage very static participation, right? So the best way is only if you're building in this space, then it's worthy to participate in these working groups, right? Otherwise it's of no use. And if you are, then please do reach out. That's it from my end. Sharad, over to you.
Yeah, so our next one is going to be at 11:30 a.m. on 27th of June. Same process. Look, for information on our blog. Karthik sends out an email a few days before the session. You already have the link to register for it here. So do participate in that, and we'll be covering the test ecosystem at that point in time. So with that, we're going to end this one. I know it's short and sweet, but we wanted to cover it all the same, and really appreciate your participation and wishing you happy building for all these components in the next few weeks. So do spend time building this out. This is going to be very important for the ecosystem in the long run. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, folks. Bye.
Thank you, Sharad.